The summer of 1941 witnessed a series of encounters that systematically demolished German confidence in their panzer superiority, transforming the Wehrmacht's most elite formations from aggressive spearheads into increasingly defensive formations struggling to maintain tactical coherence against technologically superior opponents. Near Smolensk, Hauptmann Weisenhoff, now commanding a hastily reorganized unit equipped with captured Soviet equipment alongside surviving German tanks, participated in an engagement that would define his understanding of the war's true nature and the fundamental miscalculations underlying German strategic planning. A single KV-2 heavy tank, equipped with a massive 152mm howitzer and weighing 52 tons, held up an entire German division for over 6 hours while positioned in a commanding position overlooking the main supply route that connected German forward elements with their logistical support base. The monster machine, nicknamed Colossus by increasingly terrified German infantry who watched helplessly as their anti-tank weapons proved utterly ineffective, absorbed direct hits from multiple anti-tank guns without suffering significant damage, while methodically destroying German positions with high-explosive shells weighing 40 kilograms each. The psychological impact extended far beyond the tactical situation, as German soldiers who had conquered Europe through technological superiority found themselves confronting a single enemy vehicle that rendered their entire combined arms doctrine obsolete. The KV-2's 152mm gun, originally designed for bunker destruction, created explosive effects that exceeded anything German forces had previously encountered, demolishing entire building sections and creating crater fields that made vehicular movement impossible across wide areas. Weisenhoff later recorded in his official report, submitted to division headquarters and subsequently forwarded to higher command levels, that the psychological effect of encountering such machines was more devastating than their actual tactical impact on immediate combat operations. German soldiers, indoctrinated throughout their military service with beliefs about Slavic inferiority and Soviet technological backwardness, found themselves confronting evidence of engineering capability that exceeded their own most optimistic projections about future German tank development. The KV-2's armor, measuring up to 110mm thick on the turret front and constructed using advanced metallurgical techniques that German industry had yet mastered, required direct hits from 88mm guns at ranges under 500 meters to achieve penetration, while the vehicle's 152mm gun could destroy any German tank with a single hit at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The engagement finally ended when German engineers managed to approach the immobilized KV-2 under cover of darkness and place explosive charges directly against its tracks, disabling its mobility, rather than penetrating its armor. Even this Pyrrhic victory required the sacrifice of an entire combat engineer platoon and consumed ammunition reserves equivalent to those normally expended in a full day of conventional combat operations. The incident report, classified at the highest security levels, concluded that German forces lacked adequate weapons for engaging Soviet heavy armor and recommended immediate development of more powerful anti-tank guns and tactical doctrines specifically designed for defensive rather than offensive operations. The scope of Soviet production became horrifyingly clear as German forces captured major industrial facilities and discovered manufacturing capabilities that dwarfed their own most optimistic intelligence estimates. The Stalingrad tractor factory, which German intelligence had dismissed as a primitive agricultural equipment manufacturer incapable of sophisticated military production, revealed itself as a sophisticated tank production center capable of manufacturing T-34s on assembly lines that incorporated innovations German industry had not yet adopted. According to captured production records meticulously maintained despite the chaos of wartime evacuation, the facility was completing one T-34 every 2 hours during peak production periods, using manufacturing techniques that emphasized speed and efficiency over traditional craftsmanship while maintaining quality standards that equaled or exceeded German production benchmarks. The factory's production lines utilized conveyor systems, interchangeable components, and quality control procedures that represented advances over German manufacturing methods still dependent on skilled craftsmen and traditional machining techniques. Soviet workers, organized in shifts that maintained continuous production schedules, demonstrated industrial discipline and technical competence that contradicted every stereotype about Slavic work habits and technological aptitude. German engineers studying captured Soviet production manuals discovered manufacturing innovations that their own industry would not adopt until years later, including automated welding techniques, standardized component specifications, and statistical quality control methods that reduced production time while improving reliability. Intelligence analysts studying captured Soviet technical manuals discovered that T-34 design incorporated metallurgical advances that German engineers had dismissed as theoretically impossible given Soviet industrial limitations. The tank's armor steel, produced using newly developed alloying techniques that combined high-grade steel with specialized heat treatment processes, achieved hardness levels exceeding German specifications while maintaining sufficient ductility to prevent catastrophic cracking under impact stress. Soviet factories were routinely producing armor plate with Brinell hardness ratings above 300, compared to German armor steel that typically measured between 250 and 280 on the same scale, representing metallurgical capabilities that German industry would require years of research and development to match. The technical documentation captured from Soviet research facilities revealed development programs that extended far beyond current production models into experimental designs that challenged fundamental assumptions about tank warfare limitations. Soviet designers were investigating tank concepts weighing over 150 tons, equipped with guns exceeding 200 millimeters in caliber and protected by armor thicknesses approaching 300 millimeters on critical surfaces. These projects, supported by extensive theoretical research and practical testing, suggested technological ambitions that exceeded German capabilities by substantial margins and indicated long-term planning that contradicted intelligence assessments about Soviet strategic thinking. The revelation of Soviet technical capability extended to areas beyond armor and weapons, into fundamental engineering philosophy that challenged German assumptions about proper tank design priorities. German tanks emphasized mechanical sophistication and precision engineering, resulting in vehicles that required extensive maintenance and skilled technicians for optimal performance, while achieving superior reliability and mechanical refinement under ideal conditions. Soviet designers had adopted a radically different approach, creating machines that prioritized battlefield effectiveness and mechanical reliability over engineering elegance, accepting reduced sophistication in exchange for improved durability and maintainability under combat conditions. T-34 transmissions, while crude by German standards and lacking the precision engineering that characterized German tank components, proved remarkably durable under combat conditions and could be repaired by minimally trained mechanics using basic tools available at field maintenance facilities. Soviet design philosophy emphasized component simplicity, interchangeable parts, and field maintainability, creating vehicles that remained operational under conditions that would disable more sophisticated German tanks requiring specialized tools and factory-level maintenance procedures. This practical approach to military engineering represented a fundamental challenge to German technical doctrine and suggested that Soviet designers understood warfare requirements better than their German counterparts. Weisenhoff's personal transformation during this period reflected the broader psychological crisis affecting German armored forces throughout the Eastern Front. In letters to his wife Maria, preserved in family archives and recently declassified by German military historians, he described a gradual erosion of confidence that began with technical doubts about German equipment superiority and expanded into fundamental questions about German military doctrine, strategic planning, and the entire premise underlying Operation Barbarossa. The man who had entered the Soviet Union convinced of inevitable victory and German technological supremacy found himself questioning not only German equipment but the entire strategic premise that had justified the invasion and the cultural assumptions that had shaped his worldview since childhood. His July 15th letter specifically mentioned that Soviet resistance was, quote, not the desperate thrashing of a wounded animal, but the calculated response of a formidable opponent whose capabilities we have fundamentally underestimated. This assessment, written by an officer who had witnessed German victories across Europe, represented a complete reversal of expectations and suggested psychological transformation that extended far beyond tactical considerations into existential questions about German destiny and cultural superiority. Weisenhoff's correspondence revealed growing awareness that German forces were fighting an opponent whose material capabilities were expanding rather than contracting as the conflict progressed, contradicting every strategic assumption that had guided German planning. The impact on German tactical doctrine was immediate and revolutionary, forcing commanders to abandon aggressive breakthrough tactics that had proven successful in earlier campaigns. Tank units that had been trained for aggressive breakthrough operations found themselves forced to adopt defensive tactics more appropriate for infantry support, representing a fundamental revision of armored warfare doctrine that had guided German military thinking since the early 1930s. German panzer commanders began requesting increased artillery support and close air support for engagements that previous doctrine suggested their tanks should handle independently, acknowledging technological inferiority that required combined arms solutions to problems that superior equipment should have solved directly. Part 1. June 23, 1941, 6 kilometers southeast of Rozhenaya, Lithuania. Hauptmann Klaus Weisenhoff, 28 years old and commander of the 6th Panzer Division's lead reconnaissance unit, stared through his binoculars at something that defied everything he had been taught about Soviet military capability. Instead of the primitive, lumbering machines German intelligence had promised, a sleek green monster emerged from the morning mist, its sloped armor gleaming like polished steel. The distinctive whine of its Christie suspension system cut through the summer air as shells from Weisenhoff's Panzer III bounced harmlessly off its hull like pebbles thrown at a fortress wall. The acrid smell of cordite mixed with burning fuel as Weisenhoff realized with growing horror that his supposedly superior German engineering was obsolete. This moment would shatter the Wehrmacht's confidence in their technological supremacy and mark the beginning of a brutal awakening that would reshape the entire course of the Eastern Front. Before we explore how this revelation changed everything for these German tank crews, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. We love hearing from viewers around the world who are fascinated by these untold stories of human discovery during World War II. The story begins 18 months earlier in the winter planning rooms of the Oberkommando des Heeres in Zossen, Germany. Hauptmann Klaus Weisenhoff had spent countless hours studying intelligence reports about Soviet armored capabilities, documents that painted a picture of technological inferiority that seemed almost comical. According to German military intelligence, the Red Army possessed approximately 24,000 tanks, but these were described as antiquated relics from the 1930s, poorly maintained machines crewed by under-trained peasants who barely understood their own equipment. The report specifically mentioned the T-26 light tank, based on British Vickers designs from 1931, and the BT series fast tanks that German analysts dismissed as too lightly armored to pose any serious threat to modern German panzers. These intelligence assessments, compiled by the Fremde Heere Ost under Colonel Reinhard Gehlen, systematically underestimated Soviet capabilities based on outdated information and prejudicial assumptions about Slavic technical competence. Weisenhoff, like most of his fellow officers, had complete faith in German technological superiority. Born in Königsberg to a family of Prussian military tradition, he had witnessed firsthand the devastating effectiveness of German armor in Poland and France. His grandfather, Oberst Wilhelm Weisenhoff, had served with distinction in the Franco-Prussian War, while his father commanded artillery during the Great War's opening campaigns. This military heritage shaped Claus's worldview, reinforcing beliefs about German engineering excellence and tactical superiority that permeated Wehrmacht culture. His Panzer III, equipped with a 50mm gun and 30mm of frontal armor, had proven invincible against Polish 7TP tanks and French Somme S-35s during the campaigns of 1939 and 1940. The Wehrmacht's doctrine emphasized speed, coordination, and technological advantage, principles that had delivered stunning victories across Europe within mere weeks of each campaign's initiation. Every briefing reinforced the narrative that German engineering represented the pinnacle of military innovation, while Soviet industry remained trapped in primitive, backward methods inherited from the Tsarist era. German technical journals published articles describing Soviet manufacturing as dependent on Western assistance and characterized by poor quality control, inefficient production methods, and out-of-date design concepts. Wehrmacht training manuals depicted Soviet armor as numerically inferior, technically backward, and tactically inept, predictions that seemed validated by the Red Army's disastrous performance against Finland during the 1939 Winter War. German observers noted that Soviet forces required nearly 4 months and casualties exceeding 200,000 to defeat Finland's tiny army, suggesting military incompetence on a massive scale. German intelligence estimates suggested that Soviet tank production was limited to perhaps 1,000 vehicles per year, mostly obsolete designs that would crumble under the first serious assault from German panzers. These projections, based on pre-war industrial assessments and defector testimonies, painted Soviet manufacturing as hampered by Stalin's purges, inefficient planning, and technological dependence on foreign assistance. Training exercises throughout 1940 and early 1941 simulated encounters with Soviet armor based on these assumptions. German tank crews practiced engaging targets that moved slowly, shot inaccurately, and possessed thin armor that German guns could penetrate at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Mock battles used captured Polish and French tanks as Soviet proxies, reinforcing expectations of easy victories against technologically inferior opponents. The confidence was so complete that many German officers joked about reaching the Urals within 6 weeks of crossing the Soviet border. Staff planning documents assumed that Soviet resistance would collapse once initial border forces were destroyed, leading to political disintegration and rapid territorial conquest. Wehrmacht logistics officers prepared supply lines for a 6-week campaign, anticipating that most German forces would be redeployed to Western Europe by autumn 1941 for operations against Britain. This optimism extended throughout German society, with newspapers publishing maps showing projected German advances and politicians discussing post-war colonial administration of conquered Soviet territories. What Weisenhoff discovered on that misty Lithuanian morning was that every assumption, every intelligence report, and every confident prediction had been catastrophically wrong. The tank facing his unit was not a primitive T-26 or lightly armored BT-7, but a revolutionary machine that would later be identified as the T-34 model 1941. Its sloped frontal armor, measuring 45 millimeters thick but angled at 60 degrees from vertical, provided effective protection equivalent to nearly 90 millimeters of vertical steel. This innovative design concept, unknown to German engineers, deflected incoming projectiles rather than absorbing their kinetic energy, maximizing protection while minimizing weight and manufacturing requirements. The 76.2mm F-34 gun protruding from its turret could penetrate the frontal armor of any German tank at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters, while German return fire proved largely ineffective even at close range. The tank's wide tracks, measuring 550 millimeters compared to the Panzer III's 360 millimeter tracks, distributed ground pressure so effectively that it could traverse terrain impossible for German vehicles, providing tactical mobility advantages that German doctrine had not anticipated. The first encounter lasted exactly 17 minutes, during which Weisenhoff watched in stunned disbelief as 3 of his Panzer IIIs were systematically destroyed by a single Soviet tank that seemed impervious to German fire. Obergefreiter Hans Krügermeister, the gunner in Weisenhoff's command tank, later wrote in his diary that the experience felt like fighting a ghost that materialized from Lithuanian folklore. The T-34 moved with surprising agility across the broken terrain, its wide tracks distributing weight so effectively that it could traverse swampy ground that would bog down German panzers weighing several tons less. Each time Krügermeister achieved what appeared to be a perfect hit on the Soviet tank's frontal slope, the shell would ricochet into the sky with a metallic screech that echoed across the battlefield, leaving only bright scoring marks on the green-painted armor that seemed to mock German gunnery training. The sound of ricocheting shells created a psychological effect that veteran tank crews had never experienced during their victorious campaigns in Poland and France. Krügermeister, who had achieved 17 confirmed kills during the Battle of France, found his confidence evaporating as shell after shell failed to penetrate Soviet armor. His hands trembled as he loaded another round, the brass cartridge case slick with perspiration despite the cool morning air. The familiar rhythm of tank combat, load, aim, fire, observe, became a nightmare sequence of futile repetition as German projectiles proved ineffective against revolutionary Soviet metallurgy and armor design concepts. Weisenhoff immediately radioed division headquarters with a situation report that his commanding officers initially refused to believe. According to the Hauptmann's urgent transmission, intercepted and recorded by Wehrmacht communications personnel, he reported encountering Soviet armor with frontal protection that German 50mm guns could not penetrate at any practical combat range. His voice, recorded on magnetic tape systems recently introduced to German communications units, carried undertones of desperation and disbelief that reflected the psychological shock of technological inferiority. The response from division command was swift and dismissive.
Oberst Friedrich Zimmermann, division commander and veteran of the Great War's tank battles, accused Weisenhoff of panic and ordered him to close with the enemy tank and engage at point-blank range where German guns would surely prove effective. Zimmermann's dismissive response reflected institutional attitudes that pervaded German military culture throughout the early war period. German officers, products of a military system that emphasized technological superiority and tactical excellence, simply could not accept reports suggesting that their equipment was inferior to Soviet alternatives. The Oberst had personally witnessed German tank effectiveness against France Char B-1 bis heavy tanks during the 1940 campaign, machines that German intelligence considered the world's most advanced armored vehicles. If German guns could penetrate French armor, logic dictated that they would prove even more effective against primitive Soviet designs. This cognitive dissonance would plague German decision-making throughout the early Eastern Front campaigns. The second assault proved even more devastating than the first engagement. As Weisenhoff's remaining panzers advanced to within 200 meters of the Soviet tank, maintaining formation discipline despite mountain casualties, the T-34's 76mm gun demonstrated its lethal capabilities with horrifying precision that suggested excellent crew training and superior fire control systems. Panzer 303 No. 323, commanded by Lieutenant Wilhelm Steinacker, took a direct hit to its front glacis plate while attempting a flanking maneuver through a grove of birch trees. The Soviet shell, a BR-350A armor-piercing round, weighing 6.5 kilograms and traveling at 662 meters per second, punched through 30 millimeters of German steel as if it were cardboard, creating an entry hole with edges that glowed cherry red from frictional heating. The resulting internal explosion killed Steinacker instantly, the Soviet projectile fragmenting inside the fighting compartment and creating a lethal storm of metal fragments that ricocheted off interior surfaces with deadly effect. The tank's loader, Gefreiter Anton Müllermeister, suffered severe wounds to his face and arms from spalling, while the driver and radio operator were knocked unconscious by the concussive blast that ruptured their eardrums and caused temporary blindness. Burning hydraulic fluid filled the compartment with toxic smoke, forcing the surviving crew members to bail out through escape hatches, while German machine gun ammunition cooked off in rapid succession, creating a fireworks display that marked another failure of German tactical doctrine. What shocked German tank crews even more than the T-34's armor and firepower was the revelation of Soviet production capacity that became apparent as intelligence reports accumulated throughout the opening days of Operation Barbarossa. Within hours of the initial encounter, reconnaissance reports began flooding German headquarters, with sightings of dozens, then hundreds of these advanced tanks appearing across multiple sectors of the Eastern Front. Intelligence officers who had confidently predicted Soviet tank strength at 24,000 obsolete machines suddenly found themselves confronting evidence of manufacturing capability that dwarfed German projections by an almost incomprehensible margin. The actual Soviet tank inventory in June 1941 exceeded 22,000 vehicles, but more significantly, Soviet factories were producing T-34s at a rate of nearly 3,000 per year, with production accelerating rapidly as the war progressed and industrial capacity relocated beyond German reach. Captured Soviet production schedules, discovered in abandoned factory offices near the front lines, revealed manufacturing capabilities that German industrial experts had deemed impossible for a supposedly backward agricultural economy. The Kharkov locomotive factory alone maintained production lines capable of completing one T-34 every 2 hours during peak operations, using assembly techniques that emphasized efficiency over traditional craftsmanship.
Soviet workers, far from being the unmotivated peasants described in German propaganda, demonstrated industrial discipline and technical competence that matched or exceeded standards in German armament factories. Weisenhoff's unit spent the next 3 days in desperate retreat, constantly harassed by T-34s that seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear before German forces could organize effective countermeasures. The psychological impact on German tank crews was profound and immediate, transforming confident veterans into cautious survivors who questioned every aspect of their training and equipment. These men had entered the Soviet Union convinced of their technological superiority and expecting easy victories against primitive opposition. Instead, they found themselves outgunned, out-armored, and consistently outmaneuvered by an enemy that possessed equipment superior to anything in the German inventory, supported by tactical doctrine that maximized Soviet advantages while exploiting German weaknesses. The truth about Soviet tank development, which German intelligence had failed to grasp despite years of preparation, was that the USSR had been quietly revolutionizing armored warfare throughout the late 1930s under the direction of innovative designers like Mikhail Koshkin and Alexander Morozov. The T-34's design incorporated lessons learned from Spanish Civil War combat experience, where Soviet advisors had observed German and Italian anti-tank weapons in action against Republican armor. This practical combat data, combined with theoretical advances in metallurgy and automotive engineering, produced a masterpiece of military technology that established new standards for tank design. Soviet engineers, far from being the backward peasants described in German intelligence reports, had created revolutionary solutions to fundamental armored warfare problems, developing vehicles that combined protection, firepower, and mobility in proportions that German designers would not match until the Panther tank's introduction in 1943. By the end of June 1941, reports from across the Eastern Front painted a consistent picture of technological shock that rippled through the German high command like an earthquake, fundamentally challenging the strategic assumptions underlying Operation Barbarossa. General Obertheist Heinz Guderian, architect of German panzer tactics and commander of Panzergruppe II, submitted a classified report to the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht that fundamentally challenged every assumption about Soviet capabilities and industrial potential. According to Guderian's detailed analysis, compiled from hundreds of combat reports and technical assessments, German forces were encountering Soviet tanks in quantities that exceeded intelligence estimates by factors ranging from 10 to 15, equipped with armor and weapons that rendered standard German anti-tank weapons largely ineffective beyond ranges of 100 meters.
The report, classified at the highest security levels and distributed only to senior Wehrmacht leadership, contained technical specifications that German engineers had previously deemed impossible for Soviet industry to achieve. Guderian's staff had conducted metallurgical analysis of recovered T-34 armor fragments, revealing steel compositions and heat treatment processes that exceeded German technological capabilities in several critical areas. Soviet armor steel demonstrated hardness levels consistently above 300 on the Brenner scale, compared to German armor that typically measured between 250 and 280, while maintaining ductility characteristics that prevented catastrophic brittle failure under impact stress. Hauptmann Weisenhoff, recovering from shrapnel wounds received when his command tank was finally destroyed by a T-34 near Vilnius, found himself called to testify before a special commission investigating German intelligence failures and tactical doctrine inadequacies. His detailed account, preserved in Wehrmacht archives that survived the war, described encounters with Soviet KV-1 heavy tanks that proved even more shocking than his initial T-34 experience. These massive machines, weighing 45 tons and protected by up to 90 millimeters of armor, were essentially immune to every weapon in the German arsenal, except the 88 millimeter anti-aircraft gun pressed into emergency anti-tank service, an expedient that required complete revision of German combined arms doctrine. The KV-1 encounters represented a quantum leap beyond even the T-34's revolutionary capabilities, introducing armor protection levels that German designers had not anticipated for medium-weight vehicles. Weisenhoff's testimony described a particular engagement where a single KV-1 withstood direct hits from 6 different German anti-tank weapons, including 37mm and 50mm guns, before finally succumbing to repeated strikes from an 88mm gun firing at ranges under 200 meters. The Soviet heavy tank's 76mm gun, identical to the T-34's armament, could penetrate German armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, creating tactical situations where German forces faced enemies they could not engage effectively while remaining vulnerable to devastating return fire. The disparity in production capabilities became startlingly apparent as German forces advanced deeper into Soviet territory and captured industrial facilities that revealed manufacturing capacity far exceeding intelligence projections. While German factories were producing approximately 3,200 tanks per year in 1941, utilizing traditional manufacturing methods that emphasized precision engineering and quality control, Soviet industry was already manufacturing over 5,200 armored vehicles annually, with capacity expanding rapidly as factories relocated beyond the Urals using streamlined production techniques that prioritized battlefield effectiveness over mechanical refinement. The Kharkov locomotive factory alone was producing T-34s at a rate that exceeded the total monthly output of all German panzer manufacturers combined, achieving these production levels through innovative assembly line methods and simplified component designs that reduced manufacturing time without compromising combat effectiveness. Captured Soviet factory records revealed production planning that extended years into the future, suggesting industrial mobilization on a scale that German economic planners had not anticipated. Soviet tank production schedules projected outputs exceeding 20,000 vehicles annually by 1943, supported by raw material reserves and manufacturing capacity that dwarfed German industrial potential. These discoveries forced German leadership to confront the reality that they were fighting an opponent whose industrial base was not only larger than anticipated, but was expanding rapidly while German production remained constrained by raw material shortages and competing production priorities. What perhaps disturbed German commanders most was the discovery that Soviet tank crews, far from the incompetent peasants described in intelligence briefings, demonstrated tactical skill and mechanical knowledge that often exceeded German standards established during peacetime training. Lieutenant Colonel Hermann Black, commanding a panzer regiment in Army Group Center, reported instances where Soviet T-34 crews executed complex tactical maneuvers, including coordinated attacks using terrain features for concealment and enfilade fire positions that maximized their armor advantages while minimizing German opportunities for effective return fire. These tactics suggested training levels and doctrinal sophistication that contradicted every assumption about Soviet military competence. Soviet tank crews demonstrated mastery of advanced gunnery techniques, achieving first-round hits at ranges exceeding 1,200 meters while maneuvering at speeds that German doctrine considered incompatible with accurate fire. Their understanding of armor angles and ballistics allowed them to position their vehicles to maximize protection while maintaining offensive capabilities, suggesting thorough comprehension of their equipment's capabilities and limitations. Many Soviet crews showed intimate knowledge of German tank characteristics, targeting specific vulnerability areas like drivers' vision blocks, commanders' cupolas, and ammunition storage compartments with precision that indicated extensive intelligence gathering and tactical preparation. The psychological transformation experienced by German tank crews like those under Weisenhoff's command was both rapid and profound, representing a complete inversion of expectations that had sustained German confidence throughout earlier campaigns. Men who had entered the Soviet Union convinced of their invincibility found themselves adopting increasingly defensive tactics, seeking ways to avoid direct confrontation with Soviet armor rather than engaging it confidently as they had been trained to do. Combat reports from July 1941 revealed that German panzer units were requesting immediate delivery of upgraded anti-tank weapons and developing improvised tactics focused on immobilizing Soviet tanks rather than destroying them outright, a defensive mindset that contradicted fundamental principles of German armored warfare doctrine. The revelation extended beyond mere technical specifications to encompass a fundamental misunderstanding of Soviet industrial philosophy and technological development priorities. German intelligence had assumed that Soviet tank design would follow European patterns, emphasizing mechanical refinement and manufacturing precision over quantity production and battlefield effectiveness. The T-34's design philosophy represented a radical departure from these assumptions, prioritizing sloped armor for maximum protection, mechanical reliability over sophisticated engineering, and ease of mass production over individual vehicle perfection. Soviet factories were achieving production rates that German manufacturers focused on precision engineering and quality control simply could not match without completely restructuring their manufacturing processes and accepting reduced per-unit quality standards. Perhaps most devastating was the realization that Soviet tank development was accelerating rather than stagnating, with research programs that exceeded German efforts in scope and innovation. Intelligence reports from captured Soviet design bureaus revealed extensive research programs focused on even more advanced designs, including prototypes for tanks weighing over 100 tons and equipped with guns capable of penetrating any existing armor. German engineers, suddenly aware that their opponents were not imitating Western designs but pioneering entirely new approaches to armored warfare, faced the sobering recognition that they were no longer leading technological development in their most critical military specialty. The psychological impact of this realization would influence German tank development throughout the remainder of the war, driving increasingly desperate attempts to regain technological superiority through ever larger and more complex designs that consumed resources Germany could ill afford to divert from other critical military needs. The summer of 1941 witnessed a series of encounters that systematically demolished German confidence in their panzer superiority. Near Smolensk, Hauptmann Weisenhoff, now commanding a hastily reorganized unit equipped with captured Soviet equipment alongside surviving German tanks, participated in an engagement that would define his understanding of the war's true nature. A single KV-2 heavy tank, equipped with a massive 152mm howitzer and weighing 52 tons, held up an entire German division for over 6 hours. The monster machine, nicknamed Colossus by terrified German infantry, absorbed direct hits from multiple anti-tank guns without suffering significant damage, while methodically destroying German positions with high explosive shells weighing 40 kilograms each. Weisenhoff later recorded in his official report that the psychological effect of encountering such machines was more devastating than their actual tactical impact. German soldiers, indoctrinated with beliefs about Slavic inferiority and Soviet backwardness, found themselves confronting evidence of engineering capability that exceeded their own most optimistic projections. The KV-2's armor, measuring up to 110 mm thick on the turret front, required direct hits from 88 mm guns at ranges under 500 meters to achieve penetration, while the vehicle's 152 mm gun could destroy any German tank with a single hit at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The scope of Soviet production became horrifyingly clear as German forces captured major industrial facilities. The Stalingrad tractor factory, which German intelligence had dismissed as a primitive agricultural equipment manufacturer, revealed itself as a sophisticated tank production center capable of manufacturing T-34s on assembly lines that dwarfed anything in Germany. According to captured production records, the facility was completing one T-34 every 2 hours during peak production periods, using manufacturing techniques that emphasized speed and efficiency over traditional craftsmanship. Intelligence analysts studying captured Soviet technical manuals discovered that T-34 design incorporated metallurgical advances that German engineers had dismissed as theoretically impossible. The tank's armor steel, produced using newly developed alloying techniques, achieved hardness levels exceeding German specifications while maintaining sufficient ductility to prevent catastrophic cracking under impact. Soviet factories were routinely producing armor plate with Brinell hardness ratings above 300, compared to German armor steel that typically measured between 250 and 280 on the same scale. The revelation of Soviet technical capability extended to areas beyond armor and weapons into fundamental engineering philosophy. German tanks emphasized mechanical sophistication and precision engineering, resulting in vehicles that required extensive maintenance and skilled technicians for optimal performance. Soviet designers had adopted a radically different approach, creating machines that prioritized battlefield effectiveness and mechanical reliability over engineering elegance. T-34 transmissions, while crude by German standards, proved remarkably durable under combat conditions and could be repaired by minimally trained mechanics using basic tools. Weisenhoff's personal transformation during this period reflected the broader psychological crisis affecting German armored forces. In letters to his wife, preserved in family archives, he described a gradual erosion of confidence that began with technical doubts and expanded into fundamental questions about German military doctrine. The man who had entered the Soviet Union convinced of inevitable victory found himself questioning not only German equipment but the entire strategic premise of Operation Barbarossa. His July 15th letter specifically mentioned that Soviet resistance was not the desperate thrashing of a wounded animal, but the calculated response of a formidable opponent. The impact on German tactical doctrine was immediate and revolutionary. Tank units that had been trained for aggressive breakthrough operations found themselves forced to adopt defensive tactics more appropriate for infantry support. German panzer commanders began requesting increased artillery support and close air support for engagements that previous doctrine suggested their tanks should handle independently. Combat manuals, hastily distributed to frontline units, emphasized engaging Soviet armor at maximum range, using terrain features for concealment, and coordinating attacks with multiple weapon systems rather than relying on tank versus tank duels. By autumn 1941, the technological shock had evolved into a comprehensive re-evaluation of German military planning that would influence the remainder of the war and fundamentally alter Wehrmacht's strategic doctrine across all theaters of operation. Hauptmann Weisenhoff, promoviert zu Major nach des Units desperate Defense einer kritischen Supply-Depot gegen überwältigendem Sowjet-Armor, fand sich ensigned zu einer speziellen Kommission eingesetzt, tasked mit dem Entwickeln von Emergency-Countermaßnahmen für Sowjet-Tank-Superiorität und komplett revidieren German Anti-Tank-Doktrin, um technologische Gaps, das dringend den Entire Eastern Front-Kampagne bekämpfen. Die kommissionsklassifizierte Report, komplett im Oktober 1941 und nur an die höchsten Levels des deutschen Militärleaderships verteilt, konkludierte, dass deutsche Forces einen technologischen Gap facten, der fundamentale Änderungen in Equipment-Design, Manufakturprioritäten, taktischer Doktrin und strategischer Planung zu überwinden effektiv machen musste. Die Kommissionsfindungen pahnte ein soberes Bild von German Disadvantages, das weitgehend beyond individuelle Tank-versus-Tank-Encounters into systemische Probleme affecting industrial capacity, Raw Material Availability und technologischer Entwicklungsprioritäten. German Tank-Design-Philosophie, emphasizing mechanische Sophistication und Präzisionsingenieure, produzierte superiore Vehicles unter idealen Konditionen, aber erforderte Manufakturressourcen und Maintenance-Capabilities, das Germany simply nicht sustainen konnte durch Extended Warfare against multiple opponents. Sowjet-Design-Philosophie, priorisierend Battlefield Effectiveness und Massproduktion über individuelle Vehicle Refinement, proved far better suited zu Total War Conditions, das demanded Quantity over Quality und Durability over Sophistication. Die Statistical Reality war mehr soberend, als eben pessimistische German Commander hatten ermeint, wenn sie begannen, studierend Captured Sowjet-Produktionsrekorde und Intelligence Reports von Occupied Industrial Facilities. Sowjet-Tank-Produktion für 1941 exzedierte 6.200 Vehicles, inklusive über 1.300 T-34 und näherlich 700 KV-Heavy-Tanks, die essentially immune zu standarddeutscher Antitank-Waffen waren, während German Factories managten zu complete nur 3.256 Tanks aller Typen, deren selbe Periode, trotz Operieren auf Maximum Capacity und utilisieren Extended Overtime Shifts. More alarmingly, Sowjetproduktion war accelerating rapidly, als Factories relocated beyond German reach increased ihre Output mit streamlined manufacturing processes, das emphasized quantity over individual vehicle refinement, suggesting production capabilities, das würden die German capacity by enormous margins als der Wart prokrassiert. Captured Soviet Planning Documents revealten Produktionstargets des German Industrial Experts initial als Propaganda dismissed, bis detaillierte Analyse deren technische Feasibilität und Supporting Infrastructure Development bestätigten. Soviet Planners projected Tankproduktion exzedierend 20.000 Vehicles jährlich bis 1943, supported by Industrial Expansion Programmen, das würden Manufakturkapazität erschaffen, dwarfing German capabilities even under optimal peacetime conditions. Diese Projections, basierend auf konkrete Factory Construction Schedules und Raw Material Allocation Programs, suggested Soviet Industrial Mobilization of a scale, das German Economic Planners hatten nicht für eine Nation, egal von Population Size oder Territorial Extent, möglich gehalten. Der technische Gap extended beyond Produktionsnummern into fundamentale Design-Innovationen, die German Annahmen über Tank Warfare Limitations und Future Development Possibilities untergraben. Sowjet-experimentelle Programme, entdeckt durch Captured Research Documentation und Interrogation von technischem Personal, included Projects für Tanks wägen über 180 Tonnen und equipped mit Guns über 300 mm Kaliber, Designs, das German Ingenieure als mechanisch unmöglich ermeint hatten, bis sie mit detaillierten Blueprints und Testing-Daten konfrontiert wurden. Diese Super Heavy Tank Projects, supported von extensiver Metallurgical Research und innovativer Ingenieurslösungen, suggested technological ambitions, die über German Capabilities um substanzielle Margen hinausgingen und ergaben langfristige Planung, die Intelligence Assessments über sowjetstrategisches Denken und industrielles Potenzial kontradierten.
Weisenhoff's final combat report, submitted following the failed assault on Moscow in December 1941, documented the complete transformation of German armored warfare doctrine forced by Soviet technological superiority and numerical advantages that rendered traditional German tactical approaches obsolete. German tank units that had entered the campaign expecting to achieve victory through speed and aggressive breakthrough tactics found themselves employing defensive strategies focused on survivability rather than offensive capability, representing a fundamental revision of armored doctrine that had guided German military thinking since the early development of panzer warfare concepts in the 1930s. The report specifically noted that German commanders were routinely avoiding direct confrontation with Soviet armor when possible, instead relying on anti-tank guns, artillery support, and air power to neutralize threats that their own tanks could not engage effectively under normal combat conditions. This tactical transformation, forced by technological inferiority, contradicted fundamental principles of German armored warfare doctrine and suggested that the Wehrmacht's most elite formations had lost their primary tactical advantage through equipment obsolescence rather than strategic or operational failures. The psychological impact extended far beyond tactical considerations into fundamental questions about German technological and industrial capability that had sustained national confidence throughout earlier military successes. Officers like Weisenhoff, products of a military culture that emphasized German engineering superiority and technological innovation as national characteristics, found themselves forced to acknowledge that their opponents had achieved advances that German industry would require years to match, assuming unlimited resources and complete freedom from competing production priorities. The T-34 sloped armor concept would not appear on German tanks until the Panther's troubled introduction in 1943, while the KV series heavy armor protection would not be matched by German vehicles until the Tiger's deployment in late 1942, representing development delays that reflected fundamental problems in German industrial planning and technological priorities. Perhaps most significantly, the encounter with Soviet armor revealed fundamental flaws in German intelligence gathering and strategic planning that extended far beyond military technology into comprehensive misunderstanding of Soviet society, industrial capacity, and strategic intentions. The same agencies that had completely misjudged Soviet tank capability had also underestimated Soviet industrial capacity, population reserves, military leadership quality, and national determination to resist German occupation. German planners who had expected Soviet resistance to collapse within 6 weeks found themselves confronting an opponent whose material capabilities were expanding rather than diminishing as the conflict progressed, supported by popular resistance and strategic depth that German intelligence had failed to anticipate. The long-term consequences of this technological revelation would reshape not only German military doctrine but the entire trajectory of the Second World War across all theaters of operation. Tank designs developed in response to Soviet armor superiority, including the Panther and Tiger series that emphasized massive armor protection and powerful guns over mechanical reliability and production efficiency, would consume enormous resources and manufacturing capacity that Germany could ill afford to divert from other critical military needs, including aircraft production, naval construction, and infantry equipment manufacturing. The psychological impact on German forces, demonstrated by units like Weisenhoff's command that had experienced technological shock firsthand, contributed to a gradual erosion of confidence that would influence every subsequent campaign on the Eastern Front, and eventually spread to other theaters as German equipment proved increasingly obsolete against Allied innovations.
The industrial competition initiated by Soviet tank superiority forced Germany into a technological arms race that ultimately favored nations with larger industrial bases and greater raw material resources, transforming World War II from a conflict decided by tactical excellence and operational innovation into a grinding war of industrial attrition that played to Soviet and American strengths while exposing German weaknesses. German attempts to match Soviet production through increasingly sophisticated tank designs paradoxically reduced their competitive position by consuming resources that could have maintained numerical parity through continued production of simpler but adequate vehicles, demonstrating how technological shock could force strategic errors that compounded initial disadvantages. Years later, reflecting on his transformation from confident panzer officer to sobered veteran who understood the true nature of modern industrial warfare, Weisenhoff would describe those first encounters with Soviet armor as the moment when he realized that Germany had fundamentally misjudged not only Soviet military capability, but the entire nature of the conflict they had initiated. The sleek T-34 that had emerged from the Lithuanian mist on that June morning represented more than superior engineering. It symbolized a level of industrial and technical competence that challenged every assumption about Soviet society, technological capability, and strategic planning that had shaped German decision-making since the Nazi rise to power. For German tank crews who had expected easy victories against primitive opponents, the lesson was both humbling and terrifying. That technological superiority could shift rapidly in modern warfare, and that underestimating one's enemies could prove catastrophically fatal in conflicts where industrial capacity and engineering innovation determined outcomes more decisively than traditional military virtues like courage, discipline, and tactical skill. The metallic screech of German shells bouncing harmlessly off Soviet armor would echo in their memories long after the war ended, a constant reminder that the conflict they thought they understood had been something entirely different from the beginning, a technological and industrial competition that Germany was destined to lose from the moment they encountered their first T-34 in the misty Lithuanian countryside.